Hello all, Rick here, depending on when this comes out, wishing you a happy new year. So, this video is basically to look into the history of the emergency holograms in Star Trek and how the various projects evolved in a relatively short amount of time. The Starfleet Institute of Holography has always been a field of study within the Federation, but what really kicked things into overdrive was the advent of the new holodeck tech implemented alongside the sophisticated computer core of something like the Galaxy-class starship. The accidental creation of the Moriarty computer program, a self-aware hologram with the capacity to grow and develop, was an event that captured the attention of one Dr Lewis Zimmerman, already a well-established programmer within that field, who arrived on Jupiter Station in 2361. In Moriarty, he saw the potential to create a sentient hologram that not only could learn to expand their functionality, but also had the desire to. We already had incredible holo programs, such as Vic Fontaine, although Vic himself didn't exist yet, that, to an extent, also could grow and take in new information, but they were still essentially simulated intelligence, not truly individual. Extensive study of the 2365 Enterprise's files allowed Zimmerman to decode the process that created Moriarty and utilise that over the next 5 years, where he created his own sentient holomatrix. His first creation based on this was a personal assistant termed Haley in 2368, and he would continue to maintain and add to her program over time, as her design permitted. Haley worked well as an individual, could carry out tasks, and expressed a level of curiosity and interest in the world around her, hallmarks of a program acting beyond its function. Although she was not imported with any large databases to specialise in a particular role. Of course, Starfleet was providing resources to the project because Zimmerman had argued for the potential gain. His project was backed by the pragmatic use of such holograms to create backups or emergency holograms for use in situations where crew were strained or unable to perform. While any field would see benefits from such creations, the medical field was chosen first, something that led Zimmerman to have to converse and bring aboard medical practitioners in an advisory capacity. An addition to his staff was Reginald Barclay, himself an avid amateur holonovelist and expert in the field. Now, what should be noted is that while the program itself could learn and grow, there were still hard limits implemented, as well as finite memory. This is twofold. The first reason: practicality. A starship's memory systems, however exceptional, are limited, and they need to carry multiple entire databases of Federation libraries. Secondly, there's the morality behind creating sentience. This is something that pioneers like the Soong family already were grappling with when they were working outside of Starfleet's rules. While an emerging area of development, Zimmerman and his team were readily aware of the territory they were entering into, and therefore limits were built into the program, including personality traits. We can see this with the early actions of the EMH, who displayed annoyance at not being deactivated when his task was finished, as without medical emergencies to occupy his sole function, he was bored out of his holographic skull. Which brings us to the Mark I. The initial Emergency Medical AK-1 diagnostic and surgical subroutine was completed in 2370 and underwent field testing throughout the following year. The program took Zimmerman's terse personality as a basis, as it was the one subject the author always had access to. I'm sure anyone who has done 3D modelling of people or paintings can appreciate this. It's the one reference I can always find. Among many of the ships that tested it was the USS Voyager, which would go on to have an impact on the field years from now. The EMH was implemented on most new Starfleet constructions, even the Enterprise E, and was the subject of some controversy, as many medical practitioners felt like their role was being targeted by its creation. While the medical hologram did its job well, there were some issues, notably that the EMH Mark I was considered too uncongenial to be a doctor, but not by Starfleet Command, who were actually very enthusiastic about the results and appointed Zimmerman to be the head of holography at Jupiter Station. Starfleet also requested that a longer-term version of the medical hologram be created too, for support roles in the infirmary on longer-term missions or in areas where organic crews were in danger. The original EMH only had an operational life of about 1,500 hours or around 3 months of continual activation. After this, the new experiences and memories would be capped and the holomatrix would begin to collapse. The LMH also sought to address Zimmerman's own foibles with his Mark I by selecting a new candidate to be the basis for the long-term hologram. Starfleet eventually selected Dr. Julian Bashir as the personality basis for the new LMH, as the young physician was more cheerful and outwardly compassionate than the Mark I had been, and so Zimmerman departed to Deep Space Nine for extensive personality interviews around Bashir. This was all to grant the LMH the ability to engage in small talk and present itself as a more realised individual, to put patients at ease and even help it integrate into a crew. But the holomatrix of the EMH Mark I would be the foundation for later projects. Meanwhile, Zimmerman had already begun to develop and improve upon his Mark I with the Mark II. While Starfleet felt the project was successful, Zimmerman felt it could be improved. When in 2373 Julian Bashir was exposed as being an augmented human, his candidacy as the basis of the LMH was redacted as his very career was challenged. With that hitting a speed bump, Zimmerman took the opportunity to redouble his side project of the Mark II, and pushed for its completion by the following year. In 2374, Zimmerman requested that all ships supporting the Mark I EMH have their holograms wiped and replaced with the Mark II. Starfleet complied with the request, kind of. While they did begin to replace the Mark I with its successor, the older model was instead retooled by other engineers to work on waste transfer barges. All 675 active models were reassigned to the menial tasks of maintenance in undesirable odd jobs around Starfleet, something that Zimmerman considered an affront as they still each retained his features, but he internalised it. It is unlikely this decision would have been made had Starfleet known the full extent of the capabilities of the EMH program, however, but we're getting to that. Meanwhile, the EMH Mark II was now standard and implemented on all new constructions as its precursor had been. While it addressed several of the flaws Zimmerman perceived with his original EMH, it was only marginally more effective, but did have a longer operational lifespan. However, even this version was not final, as by 2375, the Mark III and IV were in development, but the long-term medical hologram was nowhere to be seen. This suggests that the research and development made on the LMH was folded into future EMH projects instead, to avoid the team splitting its attention across multiple avenues. In 2377, Zimmerman himself fell terminally ill, but the inventor used his illness as a testing grounds for his Mark III and IV models, to see how creative they could become when seeking a cure to an illness outside of their current knowledge base. Despite this, they failed, as did every other medical professional, until the only remaining EMH Mark I, the Doctor, from Voyager, returned to the Alpha Quadrant briefly to tend to his creator. This extraordinary EMH had been running near continually for 6 years, and with the expertise of engineer B'Elanna Torres, had evaded the memory collapse issue by having his program's flexibility and memory efficiency doubled, as well as running through the adaptable bioneural gelpack systems of the Intrepid class. With this, the Doctor had been able to develop as a more rounded individual, developing a more defined personality separate from his creators, and even taking on personal interests. This level of growth was mostly unexpected as it required the circumvention of the numerous limitations placed on the holomatrix, that were there for the aforementioned reasons of practicality and ethics. Over his operational life, the Doctor had become a valued member of the crew, and they had worked with him to grow his system, even adding in alternate modes, such as the Emergency Command Hologram, who could run the ship if the entire crew was incapacitated. This event, coupled with Voyager's return a year and a half later, went on to show Starfleet just how adaptable the initial EMH project had been, and also raised some concerns, namely, just how sentient and self-deterministic were the Mark I's, and later designs, and did their implementation border on servitude? In the following year, since their assignment to menial tasks, the EMH Mark I's had also been replicated to work on dilithium mines, and now seeing the potential inherent in their matrices, Starfleet had a moral dilemma of their own making. It's not clear where Events went now in canon, but by 2384 the Doctor himself was still a serving officer in Starfleet and had been granted the rights of a citizen. In apocryphal tales, he continued being a voice in the debates around artificial lifeforms, recognising that not every hologram made was or could ever be sentient, but when genuine AI was recognised, it needed to be addressed. In 2385, the attack on Mars left the Federation fearful of synthetic life research, and this likely had a knock-on effect on programs such as the EMH line, probably halting their implementation at the very least. If anything, the program may have needed this breather to force a stop and make the UFP truly re-evaluate the rapid progress of creating artificial intelligence and the costs it has. While we learn in 2399 that it was not due to an AI revolution, the fact is that Starfleet had no idea what had happened and could not risk it. This is an area of canon that I really want exploring. What of the sentient holograms and Zimmerman's research? How was that affected by the synthetic lifeform ban? I severely doubt that Starfleet went around deactivating all existing sentient holograms, but it's probable that they closed off development of more. With the evolution of dedicated holoprograms exploding, however, it was not long before other designers began to replicate or adapt Zimmerman's work, especially those not bound by Starfleet's mandates. While the EMH program had been developed for Starfleet use, civilian alternatives were cropping up and integrated into civilian craft. The Emergency Hologram basic installation was sold as a standard on some non-Starfleet craft, such as the Kaplan F-17 freighter, and could be separately installed on any vessel that could fit holoprojectors. The basic installation was nowhere near as advanced as the EMH Mark I, in that it seemed more of a simulated intelligence than a genuine one, but it did have greater personality subroutines. However, this was derived from its personality scan overlay options, which allowed it to simulate the personality of a selected individual, closer to mimicry rather than the natural development of the EMH. Captain Cristobal Rios unfortunately set himself as the template on activation for all his emergency programs, resulting in a myriad crew of slightly different versions of himself. Their personalities, although based on him, were still adjusted by the required roles, which included engineering, hospitality, medical, navigational, and tactical. Each was and could fulfill a role, but as a civilian model on a smaller ship, none were as capable as a Zimmerman-programmed creation. In Apocrypha, we hear of hologram crew members that now function in other fields, and many ships, such as the Ross class, feature at least one multi-purpose hologram from a different development lab based on Daystrom, rather than the Jupiter Station team. While not canon, such things are likely, and we know for sure that Starfleet does continue to utilise holographic crews well into the 32nd century, but also by this time such photonic creations are regarded as complete individuals with rights. Starfleet has shown a great interest in developing the holographic crews projects since their conception, arguably showing more enthusiasm for the projects than their creator. For his part, Zimmerman was hailed as the father of modern holography and a foundational voice in the development of the field. His initial breakthroughs were building upon the accidental Moriarty program, and his subsequent works were pretty much just finding the right balance between factors like knowledge basis, personality, and memory resources. It seems that he likely knew of the potential inherent in his design, but the incredible encouragement and dedication Voyager put into developing their EMH out of necessity, not to mention the Doctor himself, truly displayed how far the field could go. This led to a new field of study, branching into neighbouring topics like artificial lifeform rights, and where it goes from here remains to be seen. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the history of the emergency holograms. I've been Rick, and until the next one, computer, deactivate the procrastination covering hologram.